a while since I've gotten a dick pic. Do you know? I'm on the tube. No one is airdropping me anything.
That's a weird sentence. It's a weird sentence. Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast, where I will stubbornly keep not making an actual introduction because where's the fun in any kind of repetition or consistency or anything like that? But what I will be consistent on is quality of guests. See, segues you can do them. As today's guest is Annina. Hello, Annina.
Hello, Tyrone.
How are we doing on this stupidly hot day?
Good. Yeah, sweaty. I've just been leaving a whiff of my scent everywhere I go.
Oh, that is the vibe.
In the form of sweat and BO. Little cloud of it.
For those listening audio-wise, also those watching visually. Wow, could have been said better. But for
those watching visually and listening orally.
For those engaging with this in any way, shape or form, you might be able to hear a fan going in the background. And that's because it's currently like 30 degrees outside and I am not gonna do
and
that.
And it's September.
Yeah,
it's almost double digit September. I'm like, what is this?
It's September, school is back, and it's stupidly sunny, so screw it. They're still going to give you content, but we're going to give you content with a fan, could be some air conditioning as well. But in doing the content, the way I'm very...
You do love to use the word content in this podcast, I've noticed. I did like a mass listen to the episodes and I was like, Tyrone loves talking
it's the thing, content. You know when you start saying something ironically to the point that then becomes an actual thing you say?
That was me in saying LOL a couple of years ago, yeah.
Content has now become the thing I say seriously, and with that, we'll start this podcast. I'll do a podcast for now with just, as I've been doing with most people on this podcast, how I first met them.
Yeah, we have a meet cute. We have a really good one. Yeah. Do you want to start?
So not the weird part about this, but so for me, my way of how I first met you would be Poetry Takeaway.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned at Poetry Takeaway, you'd seen me do a gig before that.
In Barnet of all places. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I saw you perform, and then I saw you exit
stage right.
So I think we passed each other and you were kind of doing the thing, you know, like those segments in tabloids that are like celebrities, they're just like us, stars, you know. And so it was funny to see you. It's not really a stage, is it, but kind of like under the lights, you know, in the front. And then at the end of the gig, like walked by you, I think you were like on your phone looking for the route home, and I was like, wow, Tyrone, he's just like us. I don't know why I flipped my hair then, for those who are watching, but and then
I am flipped hair worthy, obviously.
And then fast forward months later, I had cold emailed Michael at Poetry Takeaway, and managed to get myself on the roster, and we met in Canary Wharf doing a gig, which I was feeling a bit. I mean, it's Canary Wharf. No one loves going there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But actually, it was a perfectly pleasant time, and it was a beautiful weather day. After the writing of the poems and the performing of the poems, we got to go out and have some free alcohol. Got a little drunk, like 2 beers deep, and I'm like, woo! The bartender hit on me in front of you and Michael, which I thought was a very bold move of him.
No shame on his part at all, and I have so much both respect and confusion of that. It's like, I mean, go shoot your shot, but also really okay.
But I thought it was really beautiful because I think we'd all kind of loosened up around with each other enough that then, like, I think he hit on me and then I hit on Michael and then Michael hit on you and then you. So we all kind of like, we diffused the situation very well, which I thought was lovely. And then we went down to Canary Wharf tube station and chatted and watched train after train after train pass us by. Until I finally had to pee so badly that I had to hop on one. And we just chatted the evening away. And then that's how we met, yeah.
And then because I am wonderfully intense and have no chill whatsoever, that thing of like, cool, I've met you properly in person once now. Now, come to my house tomorrow and do all of the filming and under all of the lights and all of the things. Because that's a reasonably sane thing.
You had just gotten your podcast mic, so you wanted to test it out. Unfortunately, this is our second time doing this, because the first time, I think, was good, but not good enough. So we're doing it again.
The first time was the trial one, which was a very good trial one, and it very much, I thank you for it because it very much helped this become what it is today. But I'm also glad we can do it properly now when it's like, I vaguely know what I'm doing. I don't.
You have segments.
Well, I have segments. I have intro music. I have graphics. I have all the fancy things.
You have the graphics,
It's
yeah.
a whole thing. And speaking of those graphics, I see another segue. We're going to have a graphic come in now as we now go into our first section called Timelines. As we have already done in our testing of this, Timelines is where we go over someone's past, present, and future in the creative endeavour that they are doing. And yours, I believe, as we are going to go into, is probably poetry, I suppose. But also, if you want to talk about other creative stuff, and I mean that more. And people are multidisciplinary. That's the word, disciplinary. Yes.
Well, there's so many different ways of saying that now. Like, I think multidisciplinary was like kind of the first one, and then people started saying interdisciplinary, and now I think the hip thing is like anti-disciplinary.
Oh God.
Or like I don't know.
I mean, if that's the hip
defying...
thing, if that is the hip thing, I am not hip because I have not heard that. I don't engage with that. That is not focusing on you though. For now, then describe your past in poetry. Like, what kind of got you into poetry? What started this for you? Because especially as well, and not saying that all of my listeners are going to be in this kind of way, but I think so many people I run in circles with are spoken word poets and performing in that sort of thing. So a lot of them watched a YouTube video and went from there, or went to a poetry night and went from there. So what was yours, especially as you were more page focused?
Yeah. So I actually started out as a fiction writer. So I was writing short stories and a novel, of which is shambles, a mess. But I sort of noticed that my short stories were getting shorter and shorter. They were getting weirder and weirder. They started not having characters or plot or dialogue. And I was like, maybe these are poems, actually. And so that's how I started writing poems, just because I think also, while poems can have a very intensive writing process, and I'm not trying to discredit that at all, it is possible to write a poem in a couple hours and have it be like in decent shape, be relatively happy with it. Whereas I have never been able to write more than like a page of prose in a couple of hours. So I really like that there's no rules. There's no need to have a narrative or a plot or any kind of convention, really. Anything can be a poem, which I really enjoy. And I think I kind of, as you mentioned, quite a page poet, and I'm trying to challenge myself to be more performy with them and kind of get out there. I think I have always shied away from it because I have horrible stage fright. I don't like to be the center of attention. I don't have that like performatational charisma.
Performatation, we like that. We like that.
Poems and turns of phrases. So I'm trying to challenge myself to do more of that. But my past in poetry is that I kind of came to it as a failed fiction writer, and then have really found a home in it, actually, and have been able to, I think, get more out of reading poems, writing poems, sharing poems than I really ever was able to do with fiction at the point that I was at, anyway.
And then, like, with that, then, like, when you were doing the novel stuff and writing novels, were you engaging with poetry at all, or was it a level of just you happened to go into poetry anyway, and it's like, well, I'm already here now, might as well check it out?
I've been trying to remember what initially sparked it. So I think I'd always listened to poetry. I think, like a lot of people, I came into poetry through people like Andrea Gibson and watching button poetry, Dinosaurs in the Hood, like just YouTube, and then, writing my angsty little blurbs in my preteen years. So I think, poetry has always been there. but I think I actually regarded it as, even though I was watching these YouTube segments, I always regarded it as like the ivory tower of art making, which is a bit silly, in retrospect. And I didn't think that I had it in me to condense what I had to say into these like crystalline, word-focused, line-focused stanzas and poems. And then I realized that actually I don't want to use that many words. And then poetry was there. And I also think it's such a supportive environment. And I think it's one of the last... I mean, of course, we have some poets that have managed to capitalize on monetarily on their poetry, and there are ways of doing so. And sometimes I'll speak to poets who'll talk about their commissions and stuff, and I'm like, oh, wow, there's money in poetry. But to a lesser extent. And I think it's one of the last art forms that hasn't really been discovered by the market so much. And you can meet like a really successful, whatever that means, poet, and they're teaching and they're gigging and they have other jobs and they're doing other things. And it's a lot scrappier, and I think a lot... it's got a less of a stick up its butt than I think the world of literature.
I think there's definitely an idea that there's very few people I know that poetry is their only way of making money, their only source of income. They often have another job with it. And with that, the fact that they still keep going back to poetry, whether it's their first love or second love, I think kind of lends itself to a thing of like, no, but I want to come back to this rather than I have to do this to make money. And I think that does help the community a bit in that kind of way. But again, sticking with your journey in this, we are now going to your present section. So where are you at the moment with poetry? We were talking obviously off camera beforehand that you're looking to start doing some more performing. So like, I guess so partly one, where are you? And two, with that, like, is performing a thing you feel you're almost being pushed into, or a thing you are willingly choosing to do?
It's a bit of both. I think I've reached the point where I kind of have to get over my stage fright, I think. And I have to, I've sort of intellectually realized, no one cares about you. As people are watching you and then they forget about you the minute that you've gone. Like no one is doing this cataloging that my anxiety is imagining. And also it's okay to suck live, it's okay to have people see you maybe stumble a bit, and that's fine, and that's part of being vulnerable, which I do think is a good way of moving through the world, but is also really difficult, and I've struggled with it. So I think there's that aspect of I just feel like I need to push myself out of my comfort zone and translate this intellectual knowledge that I have about how no one cares about you as much as you care about you, and move that into the body and start performing. So there's that aspect of it. And then there is a little bit of my visa expires in April, and I'm going to try to, there's I think they're called the Global Talent and the Global Promise or something like that. And Global Talent is if you've won a Brit Award, or you've been shortlisted for the Man Booker or something. Yeah. I'm not going to be getting there by April 2024, I can tell you that much. But there's another route that if you can kind of prove that you can contribute something to British art culture. And I think having a list of kind of places that I've performed and where I've made an appearance and shared my art, both in publication as well as performance, is good for that. And also I am kind of finishing up my first poetry manuscript. Ooh. And I think I have maybe some words that I want to change here and there, and maybe a couple poems that I could add into it, and maybe some shifting around of the order. But I bought a printer.
Nice.
And so another thing about my present is that I quit my job in the beginning of the summer, and I've always had a job, and I've always been quite anxious about money and needing to have every 2 weeks money coming in very reliably, and I'm going to start freelancing and be self-employed and working for myself. So I was like, okay, buy a printer, expense it. But then I didn't buy enough printer paper. So I still had like a little bit of printer paper that I just like stolen from a library sometime and didn't buy any. And so I only had maybe like 16 sheets of printer paper. They were like a little bit stained as well. Like I think I'd put like coffee on them.
So it's an exclusive first manuscript. Unique.
And I had to format it so that each page had like 4 pages on it. So then I have these like tiny little sheets, and I laid them on the floor of my living room and fiddled around with the order a bit. And so I think I have vaguely kind of ish how I want it to be shaped. But yeah, that's exciting, and also a bit, I guess, puts me in an interesting place artistically, where I feel like I've gotten out a lot of the material that I wanted to write poems about, like everything that was kind of like hot enough to the touch that I wanted to write about it. And so these poems kind of document a lot of my 20s. And now I'm like, what do I write about now? Which is exciting. And also to kind of segue into the future, making me realize that I think I need to really prioritize like absorbing things, absorbing new things, and kind of getting those new inputs that I can kind of metabolize into poetry. Because I think... the things that I've been fixated on or writing poems about, I'm sure will continue my whole life. You know, you see these poets that have put out 10 collections, and through each collection you see some of the same fixations, but kind of over time. And I think that that will be the case for me as well. There are things that I'm still going to be me, and I'm still going to be interested in, but I want to learn new things. I want to read new things. I want to challenge myself in new ways, and not be so sick of myself. I don't know. I think at this point, I've reached the point where I'm just like, oh, I'm so sick of myself. I'm so sick of these like 2 things that I write about.
I've heard it joked about with a few people that like we only have like 5 or 6 different stories we write, and we keep writing the same story over and over again in different ways, and like,
and that's humanity, not even just each individual person.
Fully, and like it's that thing of like, I think it's the same way of like this general stories in general of like, you can break it down to good triumphs over evil, etc., and it can tell the whole like 8 different types of story thing, and like I think similar was in poetry, but a level of like, I don't think that's necessarily bad. Like, I know I was not struggling, but when I was working on my second book that just came out, I was having lots of thoughts of like, but I wrote what I needed to in the first book, and like there's nothing, I don't have anything more to say, but like I said things fine. Like, I already talked about blackness, I don't need to talk about it again. But like, blackness is constant in so many ways, and there's different ways to tackle things. And like, oh yeah, no, there is still more to mine here. Like, there is still more things here, and like, a new thing happens in the world, and it's like, that's similar to what I was talking about, but oh, here's more to keep going on, so you do that. So I feel that, and I guess for you in your future then as well, numbers. I do numbers and lists naturally. With your future, like, where are you looking for your poetry to go, especially if you're doing more performing? Like, are there any places you want to perform, or anything you want to try and do performance-wise? And also with that, like, we'll probably talk about it more in the Let's Talk About section, but is you now looking to do more performing stuff, changing your style of writing?
That's an interesting question. I think, having discovered kind of contemporary poetry through YouTube, but still, I think, growing up in a place where there was not like a super vibrant poetry scene. So I think most of my formative experiences with poetry have been reading poems myself, in a book. And from that, kind of gaining this sensibility, and also because I'm so scared of being in public, my sensibility of poetry has always been so fixated on like, where is this line break? What is the shape of the poem? How does it look on the page? Like, where might I just press the tab button a couple times and create this space in the middle of a line. And I'm very interested in kind of visually and on the page how words look. And I would like to continue that. I don't want performance to necessarily affect too much that sensibility. However, I do also want to start seeing poetry as more of, I guess, a collaborative maybe medium in my own life. So I would love to maybe co-write a poem, or maybe write poems in conversation with a friend. I think there's been a couple of projects that have been like that. I forget what it was called, but there was a conversation between the poet Natalie Diaz and Ada Limon, and they wrote kind of letters back and forth, obviously two poets, and they wrote back and forth to each other. And I found that to be really interesting. And that's not performance necessarily, but it is kind of perhaps more outwardly facing. I think, I want to move into a more outwardly facing poetry life, whatever that looks like. And I think Poetry Takeaway has been good for that as well.
It's bad that my first thought of like writing poems back and forth to each other went for like poetry diss tracks, but that's...
I would love that too. I mean, honestly, rap is one of the, I guess, more mainstream, if you will, types of poetry. That's where poetry has made its money, is in rap.
Well, like, I guess with that then, like, obviously with visa issues as well, not visa issues, but looking at the visa stuff, like with your future in poetry, are you looking for your future poetry to be here or elsewhere? And if here, why here?
Yeah.
Like, why would you come here?
I mean, I sort of have to say that I am in a very privileged position where even if I were to not get a visa or have my visa denied or something, I hold an American passport and I can still stay here and do stuff, or go most places in the world that I want. It was funny, I was talking to a friend, one of my best friends, named Sharif, and he's from Afghanistan. We were talking about like superpowers that we might want to have. And I mentioned how I would want to be invisible. And he was like, that's so creepy. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll change it. And I was like, okay, I wish that I could like snap my fingers and kind of go anywhere, like like instant travel.
Like that, yeah.
And he was like, you're American, you can already do that. I was like, oh my gosh, good point again. Just like, skewering me every which way of my superpower desires. But sorry, a little bit of a tangent. But
no, tangents are fine.
I the thing that I like about the poetry scene here is that because it is smaller, I think I've been able to access it in different ways than maybe I would be able to in, say, the US, where it's just so big. There's just so many people, and it's vibrant in many ways, obviously. But I think for myself, as a, I guess, slightly shyer person, I haven't had to try as hard to make these connections that I've been able to make. You know, if I were in the US, like I wouldn't be sitting around with an American Tyrone Lewis being interviewed for a podcast. I don't even know who American Tyrone Lewis would be. I mean, the poetry world has continued without me there, obviously. So I like that about it. I think that my controversial opinion is that the world of American poetry is very, very innovative, but it's also a lot more gatekept, I think. Mm-hmm. Overall. Yeah. I mean, these are huge generalizations, obviously, but
I still love the idea that we're saying that I come to London because it's small. It's kind of what to go away from that.
Yeah, this, cute...
cute, quaint little London.
Provincial town.
Well, on that wonderful note, we will end the future and timeline section there, as we will now move into the fun Let's Talk About section, where we'll probably go a little bit deep on page poetry and all of that side of things. going into our next section. Seamless, always seamless. Going into our next section, we're doing the Let's Talk About section, where I will say let's talk about page poetry, but we'll see how much we stick to it as a topic. But nevertheless, as discussed beforehand, you are arguing more of a page poet than a performance poet in that kind of way. And just for argument stereotypes, they can bring up this division. What would you describe as a page poet is then? Just to kind of get us a good grounding for this.
I would say it's a good question. I mean, I don't know, because I think, of course, there's these divisions, and I think I'm stereotypes are useful in some ways because they can kind of help you make decisions or have viewpoints on the world without having to use so much of your brain all the time. And so for that reason, I think the divisions of kind of like page poetry and performance poetry are kind of useful in the sense that if you only have so much finite time and you're like, would I rather go to a performance or would I rather like sit and read a book, whatever. But I think practically in the world, it's a very, very porous distinction. And I think because poetry, one of the things that I like about it is that kind of anyone can do it. And you can write a poem and you can put it as your Facebook status if you wanted, or you could write a poem and record yourself and put it on Instagram. And people have had a lot of success actually with TikTok poetry and things like that. I think these distinctions are becoming kind of less and less important. But for me, what a page poet is a poet that wants to be maybe like sat with, as opposed to sat in front of, perhaps. And so the poems that I write don't necessarily have those beats. I think page poetry is the like avant-garde theater, and performance poetry is the stand-up comedy. Which sounds so like a diss, but I don't mean it to be.
I mean, it is. Just calling it what it is the whole thing of you're interacting with the audience in a different way. So there's different beats and things to hit on. Like with page poetry, you don't have an audience directly in front of you that are reacting. So, like,
I think page poems can be like very mysterious and weird, which sometimes I don't like. Like sometimes I'll read a poem and I'm like, what is the mist? Like, what is it representing? Why are all these words in this order? Like, why is it in this shape? Like, what am I supposed to take from it? And sometimes I get very frustrated with these poems like this. And I'm just like, just say it.
Almost the idea, like I want to enjoy the poem and they make me do homework and figure it out. Like, I just want to just be entertained by the...
Yeah.
There's definitely... I get that side of
There's
things.
a time and place for both. And I really, really, really enjoy performance poems. And I really enjoy the feeling of... And I think... something that I don't know in my writing style, whether I would get it as much as I love the feeling of kind of being in an audience and listening to a poet share their poem, and just the way that they read it or the way that they recite it, or like where they pause and where they like look up or look around, and like that kind of immersive experience of it in a different way. It's just creating a different relationship between the poem, the poet, and an audience that I think sometimes when you're reading on a page, you get in a different way, because you can kind of sit with it for as long as you want. You can read it at whatever speed you want, or in whatever order you want, or the poet is more invisible in a page poem in that way, but also it's more intimate because it is just you and this poem as a reader and this poem. Whereas I think a performed poem has more spaces to negotiate and more kind of parties involved. And I think they both have their place, and they're both really important, I think.
Yeah, because I found it interesting of late that, like, in the whole inputting some of my poems into the page and having my books out, I've had people that want me to read the poem out loud first before they read it, or a level they want to have a reference back to how I would do it before they read. And part of me is like, I mean, I like that you like my performance style enough that you want that, but also a level of, I put it on the page kind of for a reason, a level which should exist on the page without me. And I think that's almost part of, not my only distinction, but one of my distinctions with page poetry, almost level of, in page poetry, the poem exists without me. It's a way for me, it's not me to choose how you engage with it. Whereas when it's performing, like, I'm dictating how this goes. I'm telling you how to engage with it. I'm telling you, hopefully by my inflections, if I want you to laugh here, cry here, if this is funny, if it's sad.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're reading it, you can interpret your own damn way, and you can find your own joke there that I was not expecting. And
Yeah. And I think about it as well, like, you know, when sometimes I will often have an experience of going to a concert before I've really engaged with the band or the artist, because I'm someone who's like very persuadable, and just be like dragged along to these shows, and I'm like, I don't know who this band is.
Perfect +1. So yes, and up for anything.
Yeah, yes, and and so I'll go to these shows and I'll listen to a song and I'll be like, oh my god, I love it so much, and then I'll go to like Spotify afterwards and I'll listen to the recorded version of it, and it just won't hit the same. Or alternatively, sometimes I'll find a version of a song and I'll be like, I love exactly how this riff goes in this recording, and then I'll see it live and I'm like, no, you changed it. And so I think it's just all about kind of different experiences and our attachments to them at certain times. And I think the beautiful thing about art is that you can experience it however you want, whether that's on a page or in a room.
And I guess on an experience of however you want, obviously going back to the timeline section, you're talking about how you kind of always engage with like button poetry and that kind of stuff, whilst also doing the novel writing and transitioning. Like, I guess, how was it from listening to poetry to then writing poetry, and like, how easy were you noticing the difference? Were you noticing many differences in just in that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, my first poems were like absolutely terrible, of course. I think when I started to try to write poems on purpose, let's say, they were terrible because I think I was trying to make them something that they weren't. You know, either trying to make them more kind of built to be read out loud, or making them more trying to replicate different people's styles. Because I think it's kind of harder in some ways to sustain like a novel, let's say, in someone else's voice. But you can kind of write a stanza and be like, this is my like facsimile, this is my approximate style of like a Tyrone Lewis poem, and try to like put someone else's voice but with your words. And however, there's only so long you can kind of do that before it's just not the right vessel for kind of what you have to say if you're using someone else's style of saying it. That being said, though, I mean, I've been thinking about, in part because I feel like I've, at this point, exhausted a lot of what I have to say. And so I've been thinking about, okay, what is next? Like, should I maybe try writing persona poems, or, poems kind of not in the style of someone else, but maybe using another person's voice or using their experience. The way that I think, I'm trying to think of people who've done it really. I mean, I think a really popular thing to do is to like write poems about like ancient Greeks, and be like, I am Persephone in this poem. And I've been kind of exploring the idea of doing that a little bit. But that is also making me realize how much of kind of any poem is an act of interpretation, and how any poem is an act of translation.
Like, I think one of the things that definitely triggers in my head there is, I feel like it's definitely, in written stuff compared to performed stuff, I think there's definitely in poetry at the very least, there's definitely a lean towards, if you're performing a poem, often it's yours, it's about you, you are some level connected to it, whereas in page poetry, not that that isn't the case, but a level that there's much more of a acceptance of I can write about something else, and like you see the same in fiction, and like the amount of fiction stories that are about Megan, they're fiction, they're made up stuff, etc. Whereas for whatever reason, a lot of spoken word poetry kind of is just assumed to be, oh, you're telling your story, and that's kind of what we come to expect here. And I find that always a bit
jarring, because we wouldn't make those same assumptions about a lot of other art forms. You know, I think if you go to a gallery and you're looking at a painting of like a bush, you're not necessarily, oh, that must be the bush that this artist stares at every morning when they open their window. Like, it could just be a bush. But yeah, I think kind of backtracking a tiny bit, because what you said reminded me of something else that's like only tangentially related to what you just said.
Go for it. All about the tangents.
I think another thing that kind of comes to my mind as a distinction is I think I love going to poetry readings, and often these poetry readings is like page poets reading from their books or from their phones. And sometimes what will happen, and I think this is where I was going with the concert versus like recording studio version, is that I will often like read a poem and then I'll listen to a poet read it, let's say, and I just will tune out. I love going to poetry readings and then just like not intaking a single word that's being read to me, because I feel like I need to have it in front of me to kind of follow it. Whereas I think in performance poetry, like I'll have almost the opposite experience sometimes, where I'll fall in love with the performance of it and of someone kind of performing it and being engaging, and it's like a full body experience, and then I'll go to it on the page and I'm like, oh, I can't really replicate this by just reading it myself. And that, strikes me as like maybe a difference between it, in that it's easy for me to just completely let the words flow over me in a page poem that's said out loud. And you cannot really do that in performance poetry.
It's without throwing all poetry readings under the bus, it's one of my, not issues, but one of the things I struggle with poetry readings. Like, it just goes into a whole core thing in general, which I was actually talking to some people about the other night at Shits and Scribbles. We were talking about the idea of whenever you're performing in front of an audience, and that thing of like, performing in front of an audience, often they've paid some level of entry fee to be in this room here. Even if it's an open mic and you're one of the open micers, you're still performing in front of the audience. Give them some level, give them a performance. And like, I'm not saying do backflips all the time, though I'd love to see poetry backflips. On a very random tangent, and this is going to date this podcast way too much now, but the other day I saw Vanessa Kasule on Twitter sharing Fergie performing at MTV and doing like some backflips while singing, and Vanessa Kasule wanted to try and find the poetry equivalent to that. I want to see that as well. I want to see a spoken word poet doing whatever their version of backflips is on stage. I'm not saying that poets should be doing backflips in their performance, but a level of you're performing, and even if you are, as many poets are doing nowadays, reading off your phone or whatever, it's about giving the performance. And I think part of my issue with poetry readings is that I think there is some level of, I'm just going to read from the book and literally just read from the book, and it feels like, and clearly in some ways that's sometimes what people want, but for me it's level of like, no, but I've come to the performance. If all I'm going to hear is essentially a live audiobook, I could just wait for an actual audiobook version if that's all we're doing.
And you're bringing out, I mean, I know I'm the one that kind of initially made this indictment by saying the truth, which is that I love going to poetry readings and just letting it wash over me and not hearing a thing. I mean, sometimes, it's this, sometimes you put on a podcast just to fall asleep. Like, you need these things sometimes. But, that's like an insecurity that I have of mine as I'm potentially reading at more of these things, is that, that's gonna be the audio. You're gonna listen to me read my poem, Tyrone. You're gonna be like, God, she is boring. Give me something, Annina. Give me something. But I think that is potentially what sharpens. If you go to poetry readings, I think you can kind of separate the what is that expression? I don't know, the bottom from the top, let's say, of poets. But I think a good kind of page poet giving a reading maybe has like figured out how to read their poems in like such a way to have a kind of gravitas, but also has like really sharp in between poems chat.
Yeah.
Like I think a really good poet maybe will or will not have me tune out during the poem itself. But if they can have like a good kind of like intro to that poem, you know, where they'll be able to say something funny about the poem or like, yeah, that in-between chat I think is really important.
So I'm part of a Facebook group called Poetry Promoters, and and the whole point of it is talking about how we are running our nights, producing our nights and giving each other tips, etc. And one of the conversations that came up the other day was a poet who'd come back to London and was trying to get back on the feature circuit again and trying to figure out like what's the good way to get features at the moment. And like lots of the comments were like, go to different nights, make yourself known, all that stuff. Also some underlying things like also be good is also a helpful thing because ultimately people are going to book good features.
Yeah, be good.
Yeah, but like going into the specifics of that without saying that's the only thing, I'm very aware that like one of my X factors when looking for features is, yes, the poem obviously has to be good, but like if you can do that in between part, it's like, oh no, you're good at this. You know what you're doing here. Yeah. I feel like I can book you, and no matter what poems you do for 15 minutes, you're going to be entertaining on stage.
Yeah,
that's definitely I think one of my favourites also was like seeing Shane Croizan perform when he came over to London. Like this must have been like almost 10 years ago now. No, a little under 10 years ago now. Because of how heavy his poetry is, and he's very aware of that. Like the poems are not going to make you like laugh and all that kind of stuff. They're heavy as shit poems a lot of the time. But because he knows that and he knows how to work with an audience, his in-between parts are dad jokes a lot of the time and just a lot of light-hearted stuff. And like, the poems are going to bring you down to here, but in the between that, I'm going to bring you up to here. Like, I'm going to look after you. And it's like, oh, you know what you're doing. And like, I think that's a performance.
That's still, an experience.
And I think, so with you then as someone, as you go to more of the spoken word nights and poetry nights, like obviously like you met at Right to Speak, for example, like, when you're listening to the poems, obviously you were saying like engagement with performers, but how much of you is listening to the words and going like, are you almost like hearing the line breaks and stuff like that, or are you trying to hear how it's formed out? Or
I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of poetry readings I truly am not listening. Like I'm listening, but I'm not listening. And so I think that's another thing that maybe brings me back to the page is then it almost feels like I've discovered a poet maybe at this thing, and I've really liked their gab or their reading style or something about them. And then I'm able to kind of return to their poem. And once I see it on the page is when I kind of make that judgment of, oh, this resonates with me, or, oh, I really like this poem, or this is a poem that makes me feel something. And I don't really get that during the performance bit of it. And then sometimes, it happens the other way where there'll be like a poem that I'm like a real fan of, and then you hear it live and you're like, oh my God, that's the poem. No, I'm not saying anything really profound here, I feel like, but other than, I really just, sometimes it's just a meditative time to just have, to feel like a baby in the womb being spoken to by their parent, or listening to classical music, like through those headphones that you're supposed to do if you're pregnant. Like that's sometimes how I feel about being at poetry readings. It's like an opportunity to kind of like go into the womb and just like be encased in this sound, but also with other people.
See, this is what
this is the heat speaking, guys. My brain is melted. But.
I mean, this is what poetry nights don't have on their posters enough. A level of like, come to our night for the hip. Also, feel like you're in the room again. Like that is pure advertisement slogan right there.
And I think especially being in the UK, I go to a lot of these poetry readings and like people just have good voices here and like good accents here, and that really. Benefits me in this experience of having like a really multi-dimensional tuning out experience, to be tuning out like different accents and different styles and different resonances. Like I went to a poetry reading recently, and it was like, we had kind of like a posh RP accent, and we had like kind of like a Yorkshire accent, and we had like kind of like the London multicultural English accent. And I was like, oh my God, like so many different things to not listen to. Like, I loved it.
To put you on the spot then, with the American accent then, like, how do you feel performing here? Because obviously, like, not to put words into your mouth or assume too much, but I think so many poets here obviously engage with poetry via button poetry. And I think there is definitely some level of, American voice, therefore they're good. There's a little bit of a part of it. Like, how do you feel your accent works for you whenever you've done any readings or anything?
Oh, gosh, I don't know, actually. I really have not done enough readings to make a comment on this. I think my own... Again, I mean, let's just dive into my insecurities here. I mean, one is, that I'm like boring when I read my poems, and that they just have to be kind of looked at. And another insecurity is I'm just like, I just feel like I'm gonna sound like a child to these people. Like, they all have these like cool, authoritative. I don't know. Maybe it's the like former colonial subject in me or something. But I hear an English accent of any kind, and I'm like, authority.
I'm going to choose to not go into any more depth or question on that specific part of
whereas, I feel like my accent doesn't have the same maybe gravitas of I mean, and not even just English accents. I think I experience this with almost any other accents that aren't American accents, where I'm just like, wow, like you just sound way cooler in English than I do.
Fair. Well, I guess like, almost not to end this segment, but to wrap up, then like as you're starting to do more performances, like, is there anything like technique-wise or anything you're trying to like get better at, prepare at, etc.? Any kind of things of like, yes, obviously getting over some of the confidence to be on stage and part of it, or like, is there anything like, must learn, like trying to memorize the poems or try and properly perform them, working on, is there anything kind of like looking at, this is the thing to look at?
I think what has helped me a bit is to, and I feel this way about writing my poems as well, is that I'm writing my poems like to maybe like 3 or 4 people. And if other people read them, that's great, that's wonderful, but it's for like 3 or 4 people. And so I think in my performance as well, to kind of choose someone in the audience who may or may not actually even be there and be like, I'm reading this to you, I think has helped me a bit. Because I think ultimately what is all of this for is just for connection, and is to share things, to engage with things, to absorb things from other people, to be in community and to be in space, whether that's virtual or physical, with other voices and in conversation. And I think what is kind of the main thing that draws me to poetry is just being part of this like intergenerational conversation, to be part of this intertextual conversation, interdisciplinary, anti-disciplinary conversation, is just to be in a community of some sort with other people. And I think what is drawing me off the page at this moment in time is this desire to get off the page, off my butt, off the couch, out of my bedroom, and into physical space with other people. And I think that's what I can sort of get from going to performances and maybe performing myself, that is feeling good to me at the moment.
And it's obviously, as a overarching thing of all this conversation, just to make it clear level, it's not like you have to pick a side of either page or performance. It's not one or the other. You can happily have your feet in both worlds. Yeah. So I guess for you now, like looking ahead, how will it feel? Not, I don't say straddling both worlds, because that goes kind of, I remember like, how does it feel kind of like, I know at least for me, when writing some of my poems, there's a level of like, that's a poem to be performed, that one isn't. Now that you're looking to do performing with these poems, are there any of these poems that you've got this like, that poem just will not work read out loud at all? Like,
because like, I'm preparing for this reading in a few days. And I was going through like my little, collection of tiny 1/4 of an A4 poems. And I was like, kind of flipping through them. And I was like, no, we're like, not this one. No, not this one. No, not this one. No, this one needs to be looked at too. I think this one. No. And I was like, what are some poems that I can really perform and feel? And maybe this is part of the issue of kind of having wrapped up something, is that a lot of this stuff now, it doesn't feel like hot to the touch to me anymore. And so I'm just not interested in reading this poem. I'm not really interested in like speaking this poem. I'm not interested in engaging with this poem at all. Like, it already feels like done, and therefore almost no longer attached to me in a way. So yeah, that's definitely something that I experience. And again, I think this is more of a me problem of just not feeling like I have maybe the gravitas to like birth an experience of this poem into life. And I'd rather just kind of keep it on the page for other people to do that for me with themselves.
To end this section just building off of that, but to end section then, like, for you in the poems you're writing, like, how would you feel, in hypotheticals of like, if someone else read your poems out loud, like, would that be...
I think that'd be preferable. Yeah, I would love that. I actually, I go to this poetry kind of group through the Poetry Society. It's called Stanza, and it's once a month. I go to an East London chapter of it, and we used to do this thing, and now kind of there's sometimes too many people there to do it. But we used to do this thing where, like, you know, if it was my poem, for instance, I would read it first, and then the person next to me would read it, and then we would talk about it. And I really enjoy listening to my poems be read by other people. First of all, because it especially when it's a work in progress, it really draws attention to, okay, what are the things that people are stumbling over? You know, like words that maybe together look okay, but then when they're being spoken out loud, it draws attention to maybe they're not that good together. Kind of clunky lines or misreads even, where I mean it to say read, but then someone else reads it as read. And, you know, even just like things like that. It just draws attention to the poem in a different way for me. And I also really enjoy that. And I think I really just prefer to listen to other people read poems. And I need to work on that about myself. But yeah, I really, really enjoy that. So actually, maybe that's a thing that we could do, is have poetry nights where everyone just reads each other's poems. And maybe that would also keep me from tuning out, because then I'm like, oh, this is different. I don't know.
Well, there's been lots of talk about people wanting to try to do like poetry karaoke or shuffle kind of thing, where you switch over people's poems.
Poetry karaoke.
It's a thing that people are looking to try and figure out, but that is for another day. But now we're going to go into our final section of the day, as we do slow fire questions, because that is what I called it. Slow fire questions. I know my own podcast. And now we get into our final section of the podcast, as we go into Tyrone's favourite part, which is slow fire questions. I have my 100 quick fire questions, and whilst there's always the fun of the pressure of making people do them quickly,
there's not the fun of that.
I mean, there's the fun of that from Tyrone's perspective, but there's also the thing of like, some of those are interesting answers, or answers that could be worth picking up on. Let's go for that. So I've got my 100 questions here. We'll, let's say, do 5 of them. I don't know how we'll stick to that or not, and just see how they go as we have actual conversations and go in depth on them. I say in depth. I'm aware that half these questions are not worth going in depth. That's the fun of it. That's the whole charm of it all. So please, can you give me a number between 1 and 100?
88.
88. So we're starting off with Batman or Superman?
Batman or Superman? Okay, this is actually neither. But did you know that Spider-Man has to be remade every like 2 years or something, or they lose the right to it? I think it's Spider-Man.
Yes.
Which is like, and like some of the new, I really liked Miles Morales as Spider-Man, but it takes the fun out of it to know that they're like making them actually because they have to, or they lose the right.
See, the problem is you start in a dark path of going into the movie business and all that kind of stuff.
I know, it's horrible. It's horrible.
To go on my tangent from this, the thing of like, when the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film came out, that was largely because Marvel were fucked for money, and the way to make money for them was sell the rights to their characters to different people. So Spider-Man was the most profitable one. Sell it to them and get some money. And then eventually, when Marvel finally got money back again, and the whole Disney merger as well, they bought their stuff back. Couldn't get the Spider-Man back, though.
Yeah.
Spider-Man was too big and they keep doing it. Obviously, they've now had...
But I think the contract, says like if you don't make one for like 2 years, whatever, it reverts back. Yeah.
Which is why the Tobey Maguire ones were happening, etc.
And now there's been so many. I mean, they created a monster. They created what is it? They created a monster. They created a hyperactive spider. What is the premise of Spider? It's like a
radioactive spider.
Radioactive, hyperactive. They created a radioactive. This is me trying to tell a joke and then just not having the words for it. But yeah, they created a radioactive spider.
It's. I'm taking as you're not the biggest superhero fan in that kind of a way.
Yeah, neither. I don't know. I do like Spider-Man, which is a shame that that has that attached to it, because I think that is probably the one that I like. Well, I mean, the Batman, like The Dark Knight, is a classic. Is that Christopher Nolan?
Yeah.
Probably the only Christopher Nolan film that I can stand to watch. I think he's too into how smart he is. I think Christopher Nolan.
Well, it's a quick one on you because of that stuff in the level of like, how is it engaging with the art, knowing why the art has been made? It's the whole art, separating the art from the artist, etc. But it's that thing of like, cool, you made a good piece of art, but you made it for contractual reasons. How is that for you?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it is possible to enjoy the art and hate the artist. And I think in this day and age, like trying to be less of a reductive person, trying to be more of like a engaged, like firing on all cylinders, using all parts of my brain as much as possible kind of person. I think I mean, I've never watched a Woody Allen movie. I don't plan on starting now, so I think that's fine. But I also think it's too simple to kind of cut things. I mean, I think when you bring money into it, that's where it really gets tricky, because you're like, okay, I don't want someone to profit from the fact that they're a horrible person, but they made something really good, when there's other really good things that exist that you can be kind of giving your time and money to. But at the same time, I do think, there are some bad people that create good things. And you can engage with the good thing and try to be a good person of your own, engaging with that good thing, and create something with that good thing that is good. And hopefully with other people and talking about it. And I think it is possible to propagate like a good artwork without endorsing maybe the bad things that come. Because if you look too deeply into anything,
I mean, like
everything's fucked. Everything's terrible.
It's the whole. Have you seen The Good Place?
Yeah.
It's the whole thing with the good. I know it's like tangent from that, but it's the whole good place thing of like, when you look at actually what a good deed is, actually that what you think is a good deed, then actually if you go back all the way back, it's like actually that was a bit exploitative there, or that was a bit exploitative there, or you're doing a good deed for your own selfish reasons. So is it really a good deed and all of that stuff? And it's like too much.
Yeah.
Too much. Yes. Another number, please.
I mean, we got a lot out of that that
deep
question. 18.
How old were you when you started writing poetry?
Like writing poetry. I'll rejig the question to say writing poetry that I feel like I can stand by, kind of happy with, proud of, even. Maybe like 25. It's only been a few years. Yeah.
Like, how old were you when you started writing the novels then?
The novels.
The novels.
The plural. I mean, yeah, I've started and put away several by this point. Eventually, I mean, I really, really would like to write a novel someday. And I think part of I mean, we just have to say that I think the poetry to novelist pipeline is a really sexy one. And I would love to be a part of that. So I want to put out this manuscript first so that I can be part of that tradition.
Question on that then. Like, so poet to novelist pipeline. What about poet to theatre maker pipeline? Is that a thing at all for you?
That could be cool. I went to Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year for a couple of days. And I mean, that again is something that is just like, it's almost impossible to like, unbraid kind of the way that it is now so capitalistic a venture and so prohibitive a venture for people. it is no longer in any fringe. Like, it is not. It is Edinburgh Fringe is not a fringe activity.
Oh, no, yeah.
And it's going up there. It was really difficult for me to kind of sit and watch a lot of the performances without thinking about, oh my gosh, this poor person wants to share their art and has spent thousands of pounds on it, has spent like money on their accommodation, money on the venue, money to pay people to flyer and poster, and
the idea that no one is making money off of Edinburgh Fringe,
except for the very top,
and even then a level of like Edinburgh Fringe's goal is that kind of thing, a level of, I do Edinburgh Fringe, then hopefully set me up for the rest of the year with future gigs. But this Edinburgh Fringe gig is risking it all, and it's like, I don't like that risk.
Yeah,
that is not a risk I want to take.
Yeah, so it's really a microcosm of society at large, and because of but anyway, so I don't know if I would want to risk it and do anything with Edinburgh Fringe, but going up there did kind of wake up some nascent urges in me to maybe try to find a way to mix poetry and performance. Maybe not for myself, but maybe to write something that could be performed by someone else.
I've seen a lot of people on the scene here that seem to go from poetry into that kind of thing. Like, this is where Tyron does the name drops of people he knows now, but like Inua Ellams obviously went from doing a lot of spoken word poetry into doing stuff for the National Theatre. Jack Rook did a lot of stuff at the Roundhouse Poetry Wise, now is writing for Channel 4, he's got his own show there, and I think there's definitely not a direct career path, obviously, but it does seem like, people seem to lean to that, and I guess part of that's because spoken word is so spoken and accessible, and then you make an accessible piece of theatre. And
I think especially theatre, I think theatre and poetry are much more closely related than a lot of other things. Like, I think, maybe I think there's a real like novelist to screenwriter pipeline, and then a real like poet to theatre pipeline.
You're writing a story and then put the story in. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, cool. Another number, please.
Okay, we'll keep with the 8 theme and go 8.
8. Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram?
Oh dear. I don't really use Facebook anymore. I kind of keep it around because I like to, keep an eye on kind of what the high school friends who have procreated set are up to. What my uncle and aunts are up to. But yeah, I don't use it anymore, but I creep on it occasionally. And also it is really good for events and stuff. I think, Facebook groups, Facebook Marketplace, looking for housing, like Facebook is where you go for that. But I don't like it. I haven't forgiven Facebook for what it's done. But also like for traveling, because I think, oftentimes I'll go, for instance, I have a really good friend who was living in Myanmar, and I went to see her there, and everyone in Myanmar is on Facebook. That's what is used the most there. I think it's good for that, but I don't. It could go. Twitter, I was off of Twitter for over a year. I had myself locked out of my account because that's the only way I could get off of it. And it did cure me of the need to kind of go on it very often. So now I did a couple months ago get back on it, and I think now I'm able to use it in the optimal way, where I go on for a few minutes, I kind of check the accounts of the people that I like the most on it. I retweet the occasional kind of funny. Now I just use it for funny things. Now I'm just like, and there are things, that I think are so important that I wouldn't know about without Twitter. Like, for instance, are you aware of the sort of Alabama brawl of a few weeks past? Okay, well that's. I think Twitter is worth keeping around for like Black Twitter.
Yeah.
And for re-upping things.
I don't want to say I get my news from Twitter, but given the whole trending searchabilityness of Twitter, this level of something's come up, I'll see it on Twitter and then go to other places to check out about. Now I've seen it, let's find out more about it in other places. Twitter is, I think, the most up to date with that kind of stuff. And it's a good aggregator. It is, but I think I'm
my time away from Twitter has helped me realize that is what it is, though. It's aggregating, and it's an algorithm, and it can really ruin my life if I let it. But it also can show me a very catered to me sense of humor.
Yes.
That I enjoy. And then Instagram is the next one that I potentially need to lock myself out of because I like pictures. I'm visual. I'm a page poet. I like looking at things. We've established this. So yeah, I do. But then it's rotting from its core out, in that I think everything on Instagram is now like a matter of like engagement and monetizing and influencing, and it's less about kind of sharing the photos of my like semi-boring, semi-interesting life, and more about curation, which I'm sort of guilty of being really susceptible to. But I also think it's a good tool for kind of seeing what my friends are up to, which I do like. And I think that is a double-edged sword of sometimes I feel like I'm more engaged in a friend's life because I'm able to see their stories and able to see their posts. And I'm like, oh, I know that you did this, and this thing. And so I feel like I'm a more active participant in their life when actually I am just a passive viewer of it, which is not good. I got that a lot with like Twitter as well. Of I saw that last year you put out your book, etc., and all this kind of stuff, and like I've liked all your tweets. I've been there to support you, and say no, we haven't actually talked, and I'm just one in the number of how many people, and actually, it's the power social relationship kind of thing of like, oh yeah, you don't care about me the same way I care about you. Yeah, good to yeah. But it's good. I think I'm trying to use Instagram a bit more to as less of like a foundational piece and more of like an offshoot. Like I'm trying to see it as more of like a place of opportunity to kind of to like promote things that I'm doing like in my real life, as opposed to making my real life so much about like seeing people on Instagram and being like, I feel like I'm friends with you, or I feel like our friendship is deeper than it is. And instead checking in with those people like really in deeper, more fundamental, real ways, and then using Instagram as like a nice thing to be like, oh. But because it is good to kind of see what people are up to in some ways, but not let that be your whole interaction with them. And also I've started with my friend Sharif, this Poetry Supper Club, and I think that Instagram is like really the only thing that I have at this moment to like promote that, for instance, or figure out who would be good to read it and perform it, or who might be the audience, people who would go.
There was the longest time when like part of my main reason of keeping Facebook around was so I can use it for event stuff, etc. And I very much kind of veered towards like, no, I'm just going to promote on Instagram now. Like I used to make Facebook events for like all the processes I did. That stopped, I want to say the start of this year, but fairly early on this year. It's like this is not changing my engagement, and people, there's definitely a part of me that's in the head of like, how accessible is this? Because as much as I feel like everyone's on Instagram, they're not, and it is still more catered to younger people, and Facebook is more for an older generation. So the part of me feels like, oh no, I'm not making it as accessible as I could be, and I do need to be aware of that. But it is also that thing of like, for better or worse, I've got my audience. This is where my audience is coming from, and I'm just going to keep, it's working.
Yeah.
So it's working.
And now that, anyone on Instagram can kind of share a link in their stories or share stories or whatever, so that, has made everyone an influencer. But hopefully that also means that maybe we'll see in the same way, like, I don't think there's movie stars the way that there used to be anymore. And so I'm hoping that it's only a matter of time before, like, it eats its own tail and Instagram kind of turns into a cesspit.
Give me another number, please. We'll do two more.
38.
38 is... Are you afraid of anything?
Yeah, I'm afraid of heights. I have a real call of the void, which sometimes when I explain to people, well, now that I know that there's a term for it, I feel less alone. But I used to describe it to people and be like, oh, I actually cannot get too close to the railing, the edge of the railing, because I'll feel this urge to jump off. And people would be like, are you okay? And no, I'm okay. I just feel I'm just like, I could. And that's really scary. Like, that's what scares me more than I think actual heights.
It's not the actual being up high. It's more the what you could do because you're now up high.
Yeah. So I find that really scary and very like disorienting, and like almost like because I'm so scared of it, it then makes me feel like I'm like lightheaded and dizzy, and then all the more likely to kind of tumble over a height. And so that really scares me. I'm scared of the ocean and of kind of large bodies of water, which I'm trying to get over by learning how to swim a bit more, because I can kind of tread water and doggy paddle a bit, but I'm not like a going into water person, and I'm trying to sort of get over that one a bit. And what else am I scared of? I'm scared of public speaking, as you discussed. I think I've gotten over some of the fears though. Like I used to be really scared of like rejection or judgment, and now I'm like, yeah, I mean, I wish I had more like exciting kind of fears, but mine are like the very pedestrian heights.
You're doing fine there, because like Kayla, who I do process with, will often call me her neurotypical friend, and I think in a lot of that is what the thing of like when I think of like what are my fears, it's a bit of like I don't know what I'm nothing springs to mind of things that I'm afraid of. At most, I've got things that I don't like, but I wouldn't say I'm afraid of. Like I don't like rejection, but I'm not afraid of it. I don't like being up high because it is a bit, but it's never thing like, oh my god, I'm afraid of it. And I think a lot of my things fall into like I don't like insects that much, but it's not like, oh my god, I'm going to be so afraid of being near them or anything like that. I think I've got a lot of things in that thing, and like that realm, and like I've not encountered the thing that I'm afraid of, which is
like, how do you feel about the deep sea? That doesn't scare you? Just being down pitch black, all of these weird fish.
I think the thing with me and that kind of stuff level, I'm not afraid of it because that is so conceptually not a thing I'm ever going to have to face kind of thing.
Okay, fine.
I think which is almost, I think that's almost part of the whole neurotypical thing of like, I mean, like as like if I was there.
You mean you don't like go out of your way to think about things that might scare you? God.
Somehow no, I don't. Like, and I think it's that kind of thing for me, a level of like, I mean, obviously I don't want to be there. I wouldn't like that. That would be I feel like being in that place would be terrifying. And I feel, if anything, I guess like I have been in moments of distress, like, like one of the most scared, one of the most scared / worried I ever was when I was in America and I was there for Brave New Voice, and I was young and stupid and got kind of, I was not paying attention to what was happening when I was in a taxi, and ended up crossing a state border on a Sunday and trying to get back over that state border in another taxi. Most taxis was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And it's like, but I fly home today. I kind of need you to do that. And there was definitely a thing of like, oh, I'm actually terrified right now. And a thing of like, I'm in a country that is not mine. And whilst, yes, it's America and English language, etc., there was a thing of like...
No, US is terrifying as fuck. What do you mean? Yeah.
But it was like, that was like the moment of like, oh, this is... So I've had moments like that when like something has gone wrong now and thus I'm afraid. Okay. Versus I'm afraid of something that could go wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, okay. I have some of those fears as well, Tyrone. I think I'm scared of like society. Yeah. I'm scared of this kind of... I think tendency of I'm scared. Yeah, I'm scared of the direction. You brought up the U.S. I'm scared of the direction that the U.S. is going. Just reading about the indictment that was just handed down related to Cop City, fucking terrifying. Like that is so scary. I'm scared of the militarization of society and the closing off of society. I think and. Xenophobia and just unfriendly policies, to put it in kind of a silly way. But I'm scared of dying having not bettered anyone's life, I think. Like dying alone in the sense of not necessarily like dying physically alone, but I think dying feeling like I'm not important to anyone, or that I am not that you know, I might as well not have been made and brought here. I'm scared of
I am worried how far down this list we're going to go. So
I'm scared of like what I'm scared of reaching a point in my life where I'm like, what, every time I go to like an English beach and I'm kind of like walking down this like pebble stone beach and I'm like, wow, I really look and feel like I'm like a divorced woman holding a secret, and I'm scared of someday actually being a divorced woman holding a secret along a beach. Okay, once you open that kind of worms, Tyrone, there's a lot of things to be scared of in this world.
Now though, I want you to be that divorced woman whose husband goes missing and you going to a PI going like, oh no, my husband's missing and I don't know what's happened, kind of thing.
I've heard there's a bog nearby. Yeah.
I now need that from your life. That that's not a fear. That's our hope and goal of like be that mysterious divorced woman. Like, oh no, my very rich husband now passed away.
I've turned up in this small northern town.
Last question. Your last number, please.
68.
Yeah. Best place you've travelled to.
Best place I've travelled to. You know what I've been thinking about? So I recently took myself on a holiday as part of my summer of fun, sort of quitting my job and living off of savings for a while I kind of get on my feet in sort of a self-employed freelance capacity. And something that I've been thinking about is, everyone always talks about how much they love travel and how it expands your horizons and gives you new insights and, but when you meet those people that are like chronic travelers, like chronically traveling and have been to like 100 countries and talk about it all the time. And actually, I think in some ways, and we can discuss this, does travel actually limit your horizons in some way? I'm kind of, there's also, I was reading a few articles that are sort of like anti-traveling and sort of, how everyone talks about how they love traveling and do they really? And like, what does that mean? And I think I'm reaching a point of my life where I've always said like, I love traveling. I love going to new places. And I don't know if that's true. Like, I think I like living in new places. I like, spending time in kind of unfamiliar surroundings, but I don't actually know if I like the act of traveling that much.
It has been an ongoing thing that when I have been on dating apps, if anyone has I love traveling on their profile, I will never swipe on them. Can't with that. It's not
like, what does that mean? Like, do you like kind of watching a bunch of TSA guards throw a perfectly good deodorant in the bin because it's too big? Like,
and because like, so without going in I'm aware.
I used to love airports as well. I'm really turning into a different
so one of the things I always think of, and this is the black working class kid in me, if you will, always think of like, how much money do you have that you can travel all this time? Like, I know you can get cheap deals for lots of flights and like, and going Europe actually is not that expensive, and you do a hostel here and there and blah blah blah. Not, and I'm not saying it's just white people, but largely white people that think I'm like, well, yeah, you can do the hostel because you feel safer in the hostel and can do that. And if I'm doing that, it's a different conversation all the time and a different thing. And like, I think traveling in itself, I don't think is the worst thing ever. But I do think there are some people that when they do traveling kind of almost forget their privilege that comes with that. Also, I just don't like it as a thing. Like, I like being in different places. I like having breaks. And I think there's a difference between traveling and holidays. Like, holidays, yes, I love holidays. I love having a break from this capitalist world and thing that we're doing, and so I'm not doing that all the time. That I love. The act of actually traveling and doing that as a thing all the time is level. I don't personally see the appeal. Like, I've got a friend of mine at the moment who like they travel a lot, but they're currently doing like I forgot what it's called. It's one of the trails in America, but they're doing a whole fucking
Appalachian Trail?
I don't know,
Okay.
but they're doing a trail.
Pacific Coast Trail. I mean,
yeah,
I could keep going.
like they're doing a lot of hiking and trail stuff on a level of like they like being outdoors, and I think that's also a different thing.
Yeah.
A level like they're a nature person.
Because that's like an endurance and a sort of like act of human resilience. I think. Yeah.
Not to mention as well, I think it's also like they don't like city life and being like obviously this. They will appreciate the benefits of city life whilst they're here because accessories, things nearby, the ease of that side of it, yes. But, yeah.
And you meet these people, like while I was traveling, I met these people and they were just talking about how, like all of these countries that they've been to and asked a question of like, is there any country in the world that you wouldn't go to? And the other one of them was like, no, I would go everywhere. There's a bit of or you like walk around with someone who's traveled a lot and they'll be in Tbilisi, Georgia, for instance, and be like, wow, that building reminds me of one that I saw in Switzerland, and that building reminds me of one that I saw in Thailand. And there's something cool about kind of making these connections and realizing that for better or for worse, the world is kind of getting smaller, and also a lot of cities are kind of just turning into one city. You go to London, you go to Paris, and you're like, it's all like just buildings all look the same now. But yeah, I actually think that traveling in some ways limits people's perspectives because, you go these places and are having very similar almost experiences in every single one of like meeting the same kind of people and having the same kind of hostel experience and doing the same kind of activities but in a new place.
For me, it's also as well with these traveling experience, not without, again, this is all stereotyping, this is all generalizing. That's also a caveat under all of this. This is not saying there aren't people that are good at it, blah, blah, blah. With that, I think with the experience, it's also the level of, because of these people and how regularly they travel, there's also the thing of like, you're not anywhere enough to properly get it. And I think there's so many experiences that you learn more, know more by being around it long term. Only getting snapshots of it is a snapshot of it. It's not enough to fully get it. You can get the cover notes and cliff versions sometimes, sure, but so many experiences are a level of like, seeing how it's developed over weeks, months, years, and like things of like gentrification is like, look at what Camden Market used to be like, and therefore if we talk to people that have been here for years and see how that's gone, for example, like, there's a different feeling versus just I've come here to talk to this bartender who's a nice person, can tell me the history of it, and then I'm gone.
Yeah.
That's not...
And people will be like, Camden Market used to be this way in the 80s and it was so grungy, like, and now I have to go to Athens to have that same experience, and we'll do that and then not really think about, okay, what are the ways I can organize to maybe in my home city to, I guess, preserve some of the things that I like about a place, and so not aid in this like Disney worldification of every city all over the world. Yeah, but there's also, of course, something that can be critiqued about, Camden Market was this way in the 80s, and, who was that better for? Who was that worse for? And I think sometimes people can travel in a way that like limits their ability to critically think or limits their ability to think deeply about what they appreciate about a place and what they can bring of the things that they appreciate in any kind of meaningful, fundamental ways to where they live. And then there are ways that, people travel that are fine and good and
well, yeah, I think for me it's that thing of like, it's almost like travel is the verb, kind of thing, like you're traveling for a reason, like traveling in of itself, for me personally, again, I always like to caveat with that kind of thing, for me personally, does not feel like it's it. So like I said, with friends, they travel because they like to be in nature. It's like, cool, there's the reason behind it. So what, in more level of, I want to know what the reason behind the travelling is. If it's just for telling people just the travelling, that feels like that there's almost a level of like, who are you running away for? What hurt you kind of thing, that you need to not be in one place all the time. And like, I don't want to assume that everyone that's travelling is running away from something, obviously.
But only I am, yeah.
You're running away from me. No. But there is...
Yeah.
It's just not a thing I perceive... And I think again, some of it's also a level of just how you grew up, in a level of like, some people grew up in families that travelled more, therefore it's just become a thing. Like, I first got on a plane when I was like, 10 or 11. We went on like 3 or 4 trips, and then that was kind of it from when I was 11 to when I was like 17, 18. So going on these holidays was never a thing for me in that kind of way, and part of that was money and finances. So like, I've never been that thing of person that thinks like, oh, must get on a plane, must do a holiday like that. Like I'd do a day trip to Brighton as a holiday out or date or thing like that, rather than I'm going to have a week away and do this thing. It's just never been.
The argument that, someone would make in response to that, to play devil's advocate, would be like, it's cheaper to travel than it is to pay rent in a city like London, which is true, but then also is I think showing their ass a little bit in a different way of being like, oh, so you just don't, you are just seeking places where your pound can go that much further, and at whose expense is that? Because I think there's also like a flatness to travel that happens nowadays as well, where you go to a place and everyone's already seen that place on Instagram. I've never been to Bali, but I feel like in some ways I have been to the places in Bali that people who travel there like to go, because it's like, that one temple, and everyone goes there, takes that one picture, and then fucks off. And what you don't see is the huge queue of people. And what you don't see are the locals that are like rolling their eyes and also making a lot of money from that. And that's like, it's hard because I think a lot of areas tourism is the big money maker. Like I went to Georgia, the country, and I was talking to this woman who was driving me to this winery that we were going to, and she was saying, all of her peers are making way less than her, but she's able to make more because she speaks English and she works in tourism. And who am I to be like to make any sort of comment or judgment on that? Like, I think it's cool. She was really interesting. I'm really glad that I met her. I feel really grateful for that experience. But yeah, I think sometimes travel can limit your ability to critical think.
Especially because, I think with the traveling, and kind of on that, as we kind of wrap this section up, at the level of like, people are traveling to these places, but a lot of them are still just fluent, and I'm focused on UK audiences to some degree, but like, you're just fluent in English, so you're still sticking to just the UK friendly places and things, etc. Like, again, it would be a different thing if you were learning all the different languages and speaking there and going to properly engage with the culture rather than just the tourist friendly spots. Like, I'm not saying do that, but like when I went on a work trip to Abu Dhabi, and there's so much more to the UAE, and there's a whole question marks over the morality and all that kind of stuff. Abu Dhabi is so westernized that was just like, on my day off, I went to Pizza Hut after walking past McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's like, that was traveling. And I was in a different city, and it was just hotter. That was the difference.
Yeah. One of my recent jobs was working as a waitress at this members only lounge in Mayfair. Fascinating experience. And I think I would, wait on these people, and I would hear snippets of their conversation. And, these are people that are spending hundreds of pounds, sometimes thousands of pounds in one evening to sit in a tacky lounge. And I think, take that with a grain of salt, because I think wealth has always been tacky. Like, I think, being an Egyptian pharaoh buried with all of your shit, tacky. The Palace of Versailles, beautiful, tacky. So I think this sort of, when people fixate a little bit on like nouveau riche, like, that's tacky, it's, you can hear through that, I think, in some ways, as a sort of marker of, people that never used to have money now have money, like, how gross. But there is this reality of like, I would see these people that are spending so much money to sit in this kind of tacky lounge and just watch YouTube music videos and be on their phone, and be talking about a trip that they were going to Greece or to Dubai. And I'm like, in Greece, you're going to be doing this exact same thing. You're going to find a lounge, smoke
your traveling experience is
some cigarettes, drink some alcohol, and do the same thing.
Yeah, and it's just like,
and you're just going to be looking at your phone no matter where you are. So I think, I'm in a bit of a anti-travel frame of mind at the moment. And that being said, I've always been someone who really would say, yeah, on my Hinge profile, I fucking love traveling. But now I think it's just become a thing that people say, like, I love traveling. And what do you love about it? What is travel to you? Because I think now that can mean so many things, like the word travel. And there's so many implications to what you're bringing to that word, what you're bringing to that experience.
That's fully my thing. A level of like, if you like, again, give me the reason why you love traveling. Like, traveling in of itself feels like not weird.
Yeah.
No, again, claim your opinion, Tyrone. It feels like a weird thing to just like in of itself. Like,
yeah.
What? Yeah.
And I've always been lucky in that I think done a lot of traveling, but it was in part because, my mother's Chinese, and we would go back to China to see family and stuff. And I think that is definitely like a privilege that I've had, to have these feet in multiple places, as well as it can sometimes be quite, difficult and have its like poignancies and whatnot. But I think that it is just a meaningless word now, because I could say that as traveling, like going back to like my ancestral home could be called traveling. Going to a beach in Spain could be called traveling. Going on a long distance hike across the US could be called traveling.
Going
like there's
to
just
Edinburgh could be called traveling.
Yeah. And it's become like a meaningless word. And it is one of those things that people, and when you say that you don't like traveling, if there seem to be not people that would want to admit that they don't like traveling, even though there are great swaths of people for whom traveling is inaccessible for different reasons. You don't have enough holiday days to do it. You don't have enough money to do it. You have other responsibilities that mean that you cannot do it. And then I also don't want to judge people who then travel and really do just want to turn their brain off and like sit and actually relax somewhere. Like, I don't think that every travel experience has to be this like difficult, meaningful engagement with other cultures. But yeah, it's become one of those things. Like, another thing that you see on Hinge a lot is like, I'm fluent in sarcasm, or just like these things that just don't mean anything.
I mean, that's a different podcast when you start crashing on Hinge, which I will happily do that podcast at one point, but that is not.
Yeah, what are something that just to end with a slow fire question for you? What are some things that are your, what are your dating profile pet peeves?
I mean, the main dating profile pet peeve, especially on the Hinge level, of when I have to go to the bottom of your profile to know which one you are, because it's like fucking 5 group shots, and just like...
They have friends, Tyrone. They want you to know that they're social.
Like I'm not... I don't want to say that dating is a game, a bit of like... The whole point of the dating app is that you're meant to be... We're playing the dating game, so like, the fact that it's like, I don't even know what you're... If you have your issues about like... that you don't like the dating apps, are judging people on looks, etc. That is a valid point, but that doesn't mean then you then engage with the dating app and just put up group pictures. It feels like a weird you're all white women. And I don't want to say you all look alike, but you kind of have a lot of similarities. If you're gonna be my lover,
you gotta get with. That's what they're saying.
I mean, if they're offering that, state that, and that's a different question, and I will still be interested in that kind of thing. But you gotta. So that's definitely one of the pet peeves there. Other than that, I think my main pet peeve, especially on Hinge of late, has been I have been fortunate talking to other male friends or male presenting friends that have been on dating apps. The common criticism from their side, and there's a whole different level of criticisms in the whole world of dating apps, but like, common criticism is the lack of engagement they get from people to them. They are the ones who have to engage. And I, without being, again, this is very first world issues, but that thing of like, on Hinge, when someone likes me, a level of, oh, you're still waiting for me to do the first message, and like, oh, I'm always the one doing the first message kind of thing. And I think that's definitely a bit of a pet peeve of like, oh, that seems to be the common expectation that I will always see the first message. Again, very minor in the grand scheme of things.
I think even saying the phrase first world problems in regard to that, I think is a bit like, I think in some ways Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whatever, it can be a useful tool, but also it kind of presupposes that you have to have all of these things before you can be engaged with what is arguably the most human. I don't even want to say human, because I know that other animals that are not humans mourn and feel these things as well. But it's such a integral urge to belong and to love and to be loved. And I think the fact that you on Hinge want to be like spoken to first sometimes, like that's not a first world problem. Like
I say first world
you
problems.
could be in any situation want someone to show you a little love.
I mean, I say first, especially in this case, I say first world problems in, I guess, acknowledgement that a lot of my more female presenting friends, etc., a lot of their issues of Hinge or dating apps are level
it's like, get away, there's too many of you.
not even too many of you, but things of like, oh yeah, like got sent another dick pic, that guy said something awful, etc., and that level of things. And like, I guess it's more on that thing of like, I'm complaining that I'm not being sent a first message, where they're complaining that, so this guy is awful and I feared for my life, or this guy said something really, really sexist.
It's been a while since I've gotten a dick pic, do you know? I think it's because iPhone has made it so the default airdrop option is I think either off or contacts only, and you have to opt in to make it to everyone and only for 10 minutes. So since that happened, it's like, I'm on the tube, no one is airdropping me anything. That's a weird sentence.
It's a weird sentence.
But yeah, no, point taken. I think it's a gnarly world out there, man.
Well, on that dick pic wonderful note, I believe that has now bring us to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for providing this lovely backdrop of all of these unopened alcohols.
They will be opened at some point, though. There'll be a day. One day, I will properly, and I'm committing to camera, at least one process thing will be Tyrone finally playing Truth or Drink on the podcast or something, because that's going to be completely not a dangerous thing to do. But yes, thank you for being here. Your camera is there if you want to let people know where to find you. If you don't want to be found, you don't have to say anything.
Yeah, I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Anneenz, ANNEENZH. And I have a website, which is just my name. You can Google me. Yeah.
Perfect. I've been Tyrone Lewis. There'll be links on all the things to find all the processes stuff. We've got monthly events. We've got more content. We've got the Patreon. All that stuff. Support us, because it kind of helps pay the bills. And keep some lights on. It literally helps keep the lights on, because that's what pays for the lights, honestly. But yes, help support wherever you can. This has been the Process Podcast.
I've been Annina Zheng-Hardy. You've been amazing, Tyrone. To sort of, this is like the Fringe style of send-off.
I mean, if it's a Fringe style, don't make me do my Fringe. If we're doing the Fringe style of send-off, as they said, there were so many of the PBH free Fringe shows. It was free to come in, but it's not free to leave. So if you're free to listen to this podcast, but it's not free to stop listening. It doesn't really work for a podcast. So I love you all now, but bye.
Mwah.